In a series of increasingly surreal meetings, Gorbachev tried to inject a sense of reality.
Мы с ним беседовали.
Honecker and I spent about 3 hours talking.
Не мог понять, почему я его приглашаю на беседы.
He couldn't understand why I wanted a meeting.
На праздники, какие тут беседы, а я
But we had a serious discussion.
беседовал, рассказывал, что мы делаем. Он делился, что он, ну, все.
I told him what we were doing. He told me what they were doing. He described it all as one victory after another.
Если вы
But I said, he who lags behind events loses.
события, процессы идущие, тот проигрывает.
It was absolutely clear to me that both sides spoke about two completely different things. They did not try to meet in the middle. During the whole conversation, they did not agree on a single thing.
As the leaders met at the closing reception, a plot was hatching against Erich Honecker. A group in the East German Politburo had decided to try and get rid of him.
We could no longer afford to hesitate in removing Honecker. We had to act fast. You could see that he did not understand what was going on. He had an autocratic approach to what was happening around him. He couldn't cope with the situation.
Verehrte ausländische Gäste, recht herzlich danken, dass Sie an den Feierlichkeiten aus Anlass des 14. Jahrestages der Deutschen Demokratischen Republik teilgenommen haben.
At dinner with Gorbachev and the leaders of the Warsaw Pact countries, Honecker was a complacent host. Meanwhile, a hostile crowd was gathering outside. Honecker was planning to stamp out the new opposition. No one was sure how far he would go.
There was a permanent fear that there might be a Chinese solution to the problem and that weapons might be used. We could never ignore this possibility. Sometimes we even thought that Soviet tanks might appear.
That evening, the demonstrations in Berlin continued. In Leipzig, earlier that day, the authorities made ready to meet the demonstrations with armed force.
On the afternoon of October 7th, the entire square was cordoned off by the police. It was the first time I saw the power of the police. They stood in a phalanx with their helmets and shields and face masks. And standing there right up to them, we felt their force and violence.
That night, the police charged and scattered the demonstrators. But an even larger protest rally was called for 2 days later. The army was on standby.
They realized that they could no longer control the events with the police alone. They wanted to use us to increase the pressure on the situation.
Almost all paramilitary brigades were mobilized. The voluntary police force were out in strength. More than 8,000 men were armed and sent with their equipment to Leipzig.
We were issued with twice as much ammunition as normal. Usually we had 60 rounds. Now they gave us 120 rounds.
One of us had a friend at the hospital, and he'd heard that blood reserves had been ordered, and spare beds were to be kept free on that day. The city was in a state of emergency. Shops had to close at 5 o'clock. We felt very intimidated. At work, people warned each other, don't go into town tonight. Who knows what's going to happen?
As the Leipzig demonstration moved off, the local Communist Party leaders realized that 70,000 people were already on the streets. Alarmed, the Soviet ambassador telephoned the commander of Soviet forces in the region.
I urge you to immediately order the troops back to the barracks. That's the first thing. Secondly, stop all maneuvers. Third, stop all flights of military planes. And under no circumstances interfere in the developments.
The Leipzig communists begged the opposition to talk with them. Then, without higher orders, they pulled back the East German police and troops. The demonstration went off peacefully. For East Germans, this was the turning point.
People almost fell into each other's arms and said, "Oh my goodness, now something is happening, and now finally we're starting to talk to each other. And if we talk to each other, we won't shoot at each other."
Now Honecker's allies deserted him. He was voted out of power by Egon Krenz and the entire Politburo on October the 17th.
It was high time for him to go. It would have been impossible for us to get out of this deep valley with him at the top, even if he'd mustered all his authority for change.
Now Egon Krenz was in charge. He promised democratic reforms. He assured the people that he would make it easier for East Germans to travel west, the issue which had set off the whole crisis.
Of course, we felt under tremendous pressure. It was non-stop. We had to make a move.
On November the 1st, Krenz visited Gorbachev in Moscow.
We talked very openly about the question of free travel. And he said to me, "If you don't find a new formula which allows the GDR citizens to travel, then things won't look good for you."
Egon Krenz was unfortunately devoid of any charismatic qualities. He wasn't accepted by the people. He wasn't attractive to the masses. He couldn't find the words to speak to people, because he only spoke the old party jargon.
By 89, many people, myself included, were no longer prepared to look for dialogue. I remember that we said, now our readiness for dialogue has expired. Now it's confrontation.
In vain, Krenz offered new freedoms. The street demonstrations grew bigger and asked for more. In East Berlin on November the 4th, a crowd of 500,000 people gathered.
Liebe Freunde, Mitbürger, es ist, als habe einer die Fenster aufgestoßen nach all den Jahren der Stagnation, der geistigen, wirtschaftlichen, politischen.
If you live in a system that is suppressive, you don't walk upright. You always go this way, with your head down. And now was a chance to walk upright and to show your face and to show the power of the people.
On November the 9th, 1989, Günter Schabowski told journalists in Berlin that restrictions on travel to the West would be lifted. The government meant the change to start next day, but Schabowski mistook the timing.
Bitte? Ab sofort. Also Genossen, mir ist hier also mitgeteilt worden, dass eine solche Mitteilung heute schon verbreitet worden ist. Sie müsste eigentlich in Ihrem Besitz sein. Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis, ist das sofort. Unverzüglich.
The news flashed round the city. East Berliners rushed to see if the checkpoints in the wall were really opening. The border guards were baffled.
We didn't get any instructions from our superiors. None. Only observe the situation. We tried many times to speak to our superiors, but nobody got back to us. You have to bear in mind that our soldiers were fully armed on this day, as always, and they had one order.
That order was to stop anyone trying to escape, but the crowds were huge now. Suddenly, the guards gave in. They opened the barriers.
They opened the borders and didn't take any countermeasures. They didn't consult me or get my approval.
Die hat mich angerufen nach der Das ist ein wunderschöner Tag.
I found myself in a group of people who were applauding. I didn't understand right away why. Then I realized I really was in West Berlin, and West Berliners had come to the border and they were applauding us. We were all crying and embracing each other. Even now, when I look back, my heart is racing. It was so moving.
Bekannte, die wollen mal besuchen, die warten um 12 Uhr.
Wir wollen einfach mal rüber.
Nur mal gucken. Das ist traumhaft. Und dann wieder zurück. Wann? Ne, heute irgendwann. Oder, also besser gesagt, doch heute.
Wahnsinn!
Wahnsinn! Was zu toll. Das ist toll.
28 Jahre, das ist die Stunde. Let's go, West. Ich bin sehr glücklich.
West Berliners arrived from the other direction. They began to demolish the wall in front of the Brandenburg Gate.
Also die Idee, auf der Mauer herumzuhacken, die kam irgendwie, das war so ein gemeinsames.
There was a common idea. Now we have to get rid of the wall.
Diese Werkzeuge kamen ja aus der Gruppe und
everybody had different reasons.
Jetzt müssen wir die Mauer wegkriegen.
For me, it was that I had relatives on the other side who couldn't come over. When I remembered my aunt and how I couldn't see her before she died, it made me so angry. It was liberating to do something against the wall.
Der Kommunismus ist gestorben. Wir nehmen das mit rüber. Die SPD ist tot. Ja, wir nehmen das mit rüber. Lebt doch noch. Ja, da haben wir mit so einer Zähne.
It was emotional for me, but I must confess that I had in mind not overreacting. The stupidest thing that any president could have done then would have been going over there, danced on the Berlin Wall, and stick his fingers right into the eyes of the Soviet military and of Gorbachev. Who knows how they would have had to react.
Next morning, I got a phone call. They told me what had happened. I said, you made the right decision, because how could you shoot at Germans who walk across the border to meet other Germans on the other side? So the policy had to change.
Across this wall, two worlds had faced each other in arms. Now their enmity was dumped into history. Germany would be reunited. But Europe's revolution against communism was not yet done.